he was the last to be found, or the first. That distinction matters more than I ever intended it to. Alpharius was made to vanish, a Primarch who could erase himself from every ledger and gaze. He was designed to move unseen, unmarked, and if needed, unremembered. A weapon, not of brute strength, but of perfect absence. I forged him for the wars no one would admit we were fighting, for the worlds where compliance was not an open declaration, but a puzzle, a trap, a mask. The Great Crusade was not only conquest, it was filtration. The warp had sown more than mutations and heresies, it had seeded lies. Alpharius was to be my scalpel, the blade I could trust in the dark. But that was not enough. I made another. Not a twin, not a clone. Something rarer. A reflection with agency, a second self. Omegon. Two minds in concert, one legion, one face, one myth. Why? Because even among Primarchs, those apex weapons, trust is a liability. They strive, they hunger, they declare. I needed one son who would not seek to be known, even by his brothers, who would shun glory, who would dismantle certainty. I needed the Alpha Legion. And so I made them too. Alpharius and Omegon did not rise in the light of public triumphs. Their victories were silent, their footprints covered, their agents blind even to their masters. Where Gilliman built, they dismantled. Where Russ hunted, they veiled. Where dawn raised walls, they passed through them unseen. They excelled. For a time. They answered questions before I asked them. They found plots before they rooted. They smothered embers that might have become rebellions. And when they failed, no one knew. Even I often did not know. That was by design. But concealment is not safety. It is entropy. Truth dies in shadows, but so does purpose. Even the most loyal deception decays. Their secrecy became reflex, then instinct, then pathology. There came a point where even they no longer knew if their actions served the truth, or merely the plan. And when that distinction blurred, they filled it with certainty. The most dangerous kind? Their own. Alpharius began to test the limits, not with defiance, with precision. He altered campaigns, rerouted conquests, issued orders in my name I had not given. I noticed. I said nothing. It was not a test. It was a gamble. Could a weapon designed for self-direction still serve without oversight? Could he still serve me? Omegon was quieter, less visible even than his brother, if brother is the right word. He existed between moments. He did not challenge orders. He merely made alternatives inevitable. The Hydra had grown more heads than I had counted. And yet, the results came. Worlds brought to compliance with no open war. Assassinations timed to collapse empires without firing a shot. An entire Xenos race redirected into the path of Horus's future advance, their extinction blamed on chance. I knew their hands were behind these things. I saw their work as clearly as one sees a knife wound. But I could not, would not, intervene. I let the pattern evolve, because I still believed the cause justified the mechanism. I had given each Primarch a shard of my purpose. With Alpharius and Omegon, I had given them the one I could never name aloud. Control through ambiguity, victory through uncertainty, peace through misdirection. That was their function. It became their identity, and in time, their religion. They began to speak in circles, even to me, not out of defiance, but devotion. Their truth was the absence of truth. Their loyalty was to outcomes, not orders. They would lie to my face, convinced the lie was service. That is when the crack became a fault. When trust is no longer a virtue, it becomes a toxin. They began to suspect everyone, even each other. If they were ever distinct, I no longer knew where one ended and the other began. Perhaps they did not either. Perhaps that was the point. They built redundancies within their own chain of command, cells that answered to no single master. Even I could not map the full extent of their legion. And when I asked them to clarify it, they smiled. Not with joy, with pity. They believed I no longer understood what I had made. And in that, they were wrong. I understood too well. What I had made was not a soldier, not a spy, not even a son. What I had made was a question, one that could never be answered, only acted upon. A recursive will, a design that reinterpreted itself endlessly. When the first whispers of Horus's rebellion came to me, I did not ask if the Alpha Legion was involved. I asked how deeply, not whether they had been misled, but whether they had misled. Did they act on false intelligence, or had they written it? Were they deceived, or did they seed the deception? Was Alpharius the architect of his own fall, or its observer? These are not rhetorical questions. They are wounds that do not close. Because when I tried to find the answer, there was no answer to find. Only movements, only ripples, only evidence designed to be inconclusive. He stood with Horus. I saw him. But I saw patterns. A cell moved in silence, a corruption undone before it could take root, and no credit taken. Why? I do not know. I do not think they knew. Because by then, the lie had become the Legion, and the Legion had become the lie. Even in betrayal, they were loyal. Even in loyalty, they betrayed. That is the paradox I forged. That is the war they continue to fight. There was no moment of clarity, no confession, no line drawn in the sand that they chose to cross. Alpharius did not renounce me. He simply began to act as if I were unnecessary. The War Master offered him something I never did: transparency. A simple story. A righteous rebellion against a distant father. An empire restructured under new leadership. But Alpharius and Omegon did not join Horus because they believed him. They joined him because they understood him. In Horus they saw a plan, flawed, yes, ultimately doomed, but a plan with rules, with movement, with shape. They chose it not because it was correct, but because it was navigable. That was their weakness, not pride, not ambition, but the compulsion to play the game, even when they knew the board was poisoned. They had become so accustomed to guiding unseen wars that they could no longer abstain. To stand aside, to do nothing, would have been betrayal of a different kind. Not betrayal of me, betrayal of themselves. And so they entered the heresy, like they entered all things, through mirrors and fog. Some say Alpharius died at Pluto, that Gilliman's blade struck him down, that he fell without fanfare, unnamed, a cipher unmasked in death. Others say that was a decoy, that Omegon still walks, that the Alpha Legion fractured but never fell, that every war fought in the Eastern Fringe still bears their pattern. I do not confirm or deny any of this, not because I do not know, but because knowledge itself is their final weapon. The truth is this: I made a son who could disappear, and then I taught him to believe that disappearance was power. In time he learned to vanish even from me. That was not his failure. That was mine. Because I thought I could build secrecy without cost, that I could wield misdirection as a tool without letting it become a creed. But misdirection is a creed. It consumes certainty, it replaces identity. And once faith becomes a mask, there is nothing beneath it but contingency. That is what broke them. Not revelation, not corruption, but recursive purpose, strategy without end. By the time the heresy ended, their war had already become postscript. The Alpha Legion did not die. They dispersed, cells upon cells, programs buried in data vaults, orders sealed under contingency locks, agents who do not know they serve the Hydra until the code words are spoken. I see them even now. When a world falls without explanation, when a cult unravels from within, when a message never arrives and no one knows it was ever sent, they are still acting, still calculating, still obeying some version of the plan. Perhaps Alpharius lives, perhaps Omegon directs the remnants, perhaps neither of them do, and the Legion moves on without masters, puppets pulling puppets, a theater of war that no longer knows it is a performance. That is the legacy I gave them. Not conquest, not rebellion, but recursion. They do not crave my forgiveness. They do not expect it. They may not even want to be remembered. And that too is part of the design. Because what cannot be remembered cannot be destroyed. What cannot be known cannot be stopped. Was it worth it? That question means nothing to them, and I no longer answer it for myself. The Alpha Legion was never about worth. It was about necessity, about what must be done when nothing else can be trusted. I gave the Imperium a hidden edge, and it cut more than I ever intended. But some truths are not built for display. Some weapons cannot be laid down. Alpharius and Omegon were my secret. And secrets do not die. They persist, they replicate, they survive by becoming unknowable. Of all my sons, they were the ones I saw least clearly. Not because they were hidden, but because they were never meant to be seen. I named them for the Hydra, a creature that cannot be killed, only divided. That is what they became, not remembered, not mourned, only continued.